So we all know that guitar is the ultimate instrument. And the ultimate because I think it's the easiest to express with and to make it personal. Because there's so many variables. If you go up to an acoustic piano and you got 10 different people playing the same music, reading the same music, it's going to sound pretty similar. And the only difference is going to be how hard they hit the keys, or maybe if they use the sustain pedal. But with guitar, there are so many variables from, say, if I wanted to play an E, I can choose open E. If you have 24 frets, you have 6 different places to choose from, and they all sound extremely different. So you need to choose where on the neck you want to play certain things. And there's a million different ways to get vibrato. I'm just going to go between finger vibrato and tremolo bar vibrato. It's a very different sound, although a bit subtle. When you do finger vibrato, you're essentially pushing the string sharp and then coming back to pitch. But if you have a floating tremolo, you can go sharp and flat, so it's more of a rounded sound. So that's just 2 of a bazillion choices that you make. And as you put in more and more years playing, there's a lot of choices you make you don't even realize you're making. It's just, I think that your brain just clocks what is more pleasing. If you play something 10 times one way and 10 times another way, and your brain goes, this sounds way better, then you'll automatically delete the not so good choices for the future. Now, I want to play just a series of notes. If I'm reading this on paper and never saw it before in my life. Super boring. Super boring. Now, if I take the exact same notes and start bending, I'm playing the exact same notes, but for instance, the last note, instead of playing A twice, I'm playing A and then bending G sharp up to A. Now, I'm going to dig in more with the right hand and get it more percussive. Now add some delay. So you can use little micro bends to bring some attitude into the music. So it went from to, and it's just like a whole other beast. I'll play another example of just playing notes. Like I never heard this before in my life. I'm just reading off a piece of paper. Now I'm going to add the tremolo bar to that. And all of a sudden it comes alive. Because I know the tremolo bar got super unpopular in the 90s when grunge came in, and tapping, that is so 80s, even though it's just a technique. And the tremolo bar got a bad rap at that time, and I thought, no, nobody's taking my bar away. I think it should be called, instead of a whammy bar or a tremolo bar, it should be an expression bar, because I think it's the closest way for a guitar player to get close to what a vocalist can do. You can slide into notes, slide out of notes, get the tremolo vibrato, which is different than finger vibrato. In this particular series of notes, I'm dipping into the note from flat to pitch. That one, I started flat, went to pitch, and then let it dive off with a little delay. Use a little vibrato. Again, start flat, go to pitch, and drop it off. No, not that way. So it's much more vocal, much more fluid than just playing notes like an acoustic piano. And there's more that can be done with the tremolo bar. Typically, I'll do what I just did, where I'm sliding into notes. But you can also do a thing where you push up a little bit. And that's just the slightest touch. I know when I'm teaching people that have never worked with the bar before, it's usually very nervous sounding, like it's like old school surf music or something. And it's really easy to overdo it. So this is just very, very slight movements. And a lot of times I'll keep the bar curled in the pinky and ring finger just to have it there all the time. And either push down or pull up. And when I pull up, it's just the slightest movement. It's almost like when the doctor checks your reflexes by taking a hammer to your knee. It's just, and your knee just like that. So you can get kind of an Eastern sound by just slightly flicking it up. And I'm not even trying to do as much as a half step, maybe a quarter step, somewhere in there, just to get a little hiccup in the note. So I find that it's just, the more things that you have in your toolbox, the more interesting your music's going to be, not only for the listener, but for yourself. I mean, number one, you want to keep yourself interested in it. So I like to use a lot of effects, a lot of different sounds, and as well as a lot of different sounds within the guitar without effects. When I went to guitar school, I was probably the slowest guitar player out of the 60 guys I was with. And I think I was probably the only one that never even did a gig before. Took plenty of lessons, and in fact, I flunked the test to get into guitar school because I'd taken all these lessons, learned different techniques, finger style stuff, learned songs, but I didn't know my diatonic scales, I didn't know harmonic minor, I didn't know chord scales. So I had to go back and study with a jazz player in San Diego named Peter Sprague to get up to speed. And at one point, I got into the school, got out of the school a year later, a little bit damaged from how intense it was. I never wanted to go to school again after that, but I had the skills to continue teaching myself after that. And I set out scientifically to get faster. Music is something that it's really hard to gauge where you're at, because when you get better, you get up to this level and you're always wanting to be at another level. And you don't really realize how much you're improving unless you can look back or listen to something that you did 5 years ago and go, oh yeah, I'm way better than that now. But speed is something that you can really work on scientifically, because you can go to a metronome. You can either play that steady at 120 or 140 or 160 beats a minute. And I set out specifically to really make it happen, to improve. And I was consistent every day. I had something that I learned at guitar school that I kept up for quite a while, was using egg timers. At that time, it was before smartphones. I would set my timer for an hour, and I would do an hour of sight reading, an hour of ear training, an hour of working on arpeggios, scales, whatever. And at the end of the hour, I'd just move on to something else. And for speed, I actually got out of a notebook that was an accounting notebook, that there was lines this way, and every other line was a light blue, white, light blue. And I would take all the scale patterns I was working on, whether it was groups of 4 or triplets, and I would write the name of the scale pattern I was doing on the left side, and then every day I would mark the fastest I could play it at without making a mistake on the metronome. And if I made a mistake, I would take the speed down. And so every pattern was a different speed because it required different skill level. But one thing I did, I would take every scale mode. I'm going to use the Ionian for an example here. And I would do intervals, thirds, and do backwards, usually going up a fret. And I would do this all the way up to the 12th fret with everything I was doing. So I got plenty of time doing the exact same thing. Then I would turn it upside down. So instead of bottom, top, I would bottom, top, top, bottom. So do different permutations of the scale patterns. It's hard to talk and play, but nobody died. I just did it. So thirds are one thing. Then I got into doing bigger intervals, fourths, and not every fourth is going to be a perfect fourth. If you're doing a diatonic scale, G major scale. So perfect fourth. Some of them are going to be sharp. Fifths, and of course I slow down. The bigger the interval, the more I slow down. Sixes, for some reason that's easier than fifths. I'm not going to even embarrass myself with sevenths because it gets a little, it's been a while since I did this. But at the end of, I think I did this consistently every day for 3 months, I could see my improvement go like that. And it was super, super encouraging. So I'll tell everybody out there, work on scales, permutations of scales. Everything you do it, at least a half a dozen times. I would typically do 3rd fret to 12th fret. You can certainly go longer. But it really improved my right hand. Because a lot of what we play typically is from one string to the next. But if you start jumping and getting bigger intervals, it's like the heavy bat theory. You're working with a heavy bat with baseball, so you get to the game and you got a much lighter bat. It's like, poof, you got it. And I would do the same thing for the pentatonic scales. Doing like groups of 4. Backwards. I never did that with diminished scales. That still trips me up sometimes. But yeah, it really got my right and left hand coordination happening. And I did it all alternate picking at that point. I wasn't doing any economy picking at all. I kind of wish I had gotten that together long ago. And I'm just actually now starting to work on that much more. Something I'll say about picking, and this was a great lesson back in the day. I went to GIT, it was called at the time. It was before they had bass or drums or anything else, and now it's called Musicians Institute. And Howard Roberts was the guy that did the curriculum. And I went to his class one day, and he said, when you pick, don't let any part of your hand touch the guitar. Just keep it floating above. And I had a hell of a time. It just felt so awkward. And then within a week, I saw Don Mock with his finger planted on the guitar, just burning it down. So I thought, I'm just going to take this with a grain of salt. And I've told students ever since, try different techniques and see what works for you, because there's no right answer. Van Halen has a very strange technique with the right hand where he has 2 fingers on the pick. I could not do that to save my life. I tend to hold it here, and I've just now switched to a normal size pick. For the longest time, I had the little tiny Fender Jazz Heavies. I guess you get a close-up of how I use it. And then you get Pat Metheny that'll turn a pick upside down. I think he might even use it with 2 fingers too. So basically it's whatever works for you. And also another lesson, they said, keep your thumb down. Always keep your thumb down, because when you do, your hand can automatically get a bigger stretch. And so part of my deal of going to guitar school was I gave my dad lessons. He was the one that paid for school, so I had to give him lessons when I graduated, which is kind of awkward teaching your dad. But every week he'd come over and he had this flagpole up here. And I'd go, put your thumb back, put your thumb back. And one day I was at his house and we saw a live George Benson concert with a flagpole just burning up the neck. So I just let it go at that point. Whatever works for you is how it should be. And I've just started really getting into sweeping much more than I ever have before. I'm not one of those people that just sweeps all across 6 strings. I got into Frank Gambale's book for about an hour, and I thought, nope, I'm not going to do that, because I had just learned all these scale fingerings, and he had completely different fingerings, and I thought, man, I don't want to dedicate myself to do that. So I do some sweeping. I'm getting into more. I'll do 2 or 3 strings. Sweep little arpeggios like that, where I'll do a downstroke and then up, up, up. Or here I'll take triads for an A7. I'll take triads of G and A and do it in inversions. And I did the same thing where I would do a downstroke at the top and then up, up, up. And sometimes when I have a straight line straight across, I'll use 3 different fingers. Prior to this, I used just an index finger, but I rocked it so it doesn't sound real muddy, especially when you have distortion. It's going to sound nasty if you have 2 strings ringing at once. So rock it so you get a definition of 1 string at a time.